And one thing, if anyone chose to come to Theology Web to discuss eschatology, I can assure you that hyper-preterists are not in our eschatology area. They are allowed to post, but in the unorthodox theology portion of the forum. They obviously can participate, but they are not going to poison the eschatology section. But 90% of the Christian forums out there don't know about it, so they let hyper-preterists in, and they get confused with preterism in general.
Yeah, no, let's have some more recent history on this group that you would deem to be heresy, and most folks I respect would as well. Did this really get resurrected, pardon the pun, with Max King, or did he have a predecessor? And explain who Max King is.
There's always, a little blip here. Like there were people who believed in kind of sort of rapture things before Darby, but then you have what actually popularized it or made it more accessible, and that would be Max King. And Max King is a universalist.
Oh, he is. Because he formerly was, and I don't know if he still is, but he formerly was a Church of Christ minister.
No, he's got his own thing. He trademarked the word transmillennialism.
That's right.
Yeah. And there's another group, I don't know if they've trademarked it, but they use the word bimillennialism.
I'm not going to touch that one, but
me either. But believe it or not, a hyper-preterist tried to trademark the word preterist.
Yeah, I heard that. I had heard that.
It sent me a letter that they were going to sue me for using it.
Oh, that's absurd.
Yeah.
And Max King arose in popularity in what, the late 60s, 70s, was it?
70s, I believe.
70s, okay. And his son...
I'm trying to think of when his book, I believe it's called The Cross and the Parousia. I'm trying to think of when that was published, but I believe it was in the 70s.
Okay, but the thing that's interesting about this group is that it seems to be drawing across the board from different theological camps that have little in common other than the hyper-preterism. You have Campbellites and Presbyterians participating in the same conferences and teaching on the same side in conferences and debates. You have the Calvinist and the Pelagian side by side defending hyper-preterism. Isn't this a very unusual phenomena?
I think it's due in part to the prevalent biblical illiteracy of American Christians. Now, I'm not saying that the hyper-preterists are the ones that are biblically illiterate. They actually want to read the Bible. I would never claim otherwise. But sometimes these people find themselves in congregations that take, in my opinion, and I am not saying this to offend anyone who's listening, I obviously believe that futurists and dispensationalists are Christians. But some futurists and dispensationalists are very over-simplistic, and they have a cartoon version of Christianity, which I would say is exemplified by the Left Behind series, which is an embarrassment to the church as far as I'm concerned.
And in fact, many dispensationalists agree.
That's how these folks get pulled in. They're tired of the sensationalism and newspaper exegesis.
And there are many dispensationalists who were very, very disappointed and are opposed to the Left Behind series as well.
Oh, yes. That's what I'm saying. It's just a certain pocket.
Right. And
just very, very shallow, not interacting with the text at all. And they turned these people off. And then when they went searching for an alternative, as is often with many cults, now hyper-preterism hasn't evolved to the point of being a cult yet, though I'm wavering on that. They're definitely a cultic movement. But the cults will always welcome the outcasts with open arms. You know, we're your buddies, we're your friends, you're okay here.
Well, as one of the reasons you wouldn't say it's a cult is because there's very few congregations that are actually led by a hyper-preterist, where the whole group are hyper-preterists. It's usually people who are either by stealth or just by tolerance existing in more orthodox congregations, correct?
I think they need a little bit more organization before they can really officially be considered a cult. They're very fragmented amongst themselves. There's an awful lot of infighting. They throw each other under the bus regularly. You never know who's on what side at any given year. One thing I did want to say, hyper-preterists often accuse me of, you won't debate me, which is false, because I have debated hyper-preterists. I've debated the leading hyper-preterists. But as the years went by, my conviction and my burden has been for equipping the church as to what their position should be with regards to these people. Say you've got a pastor. He's already convinced that Jesus is coming back, that, he believes all the orthodox necessities of eschatology. And then one of these folks come along. He's not really interested in debating every jot and tittle. He's a very busy man. He's got, a bunch of people to shepherd. What he needs to know quickly is, what does the Bible tell me about them? Are they someone I should tolerate amongst the sheep, or does the Bible tell me that they should be cast out? So that one article you had linked to in the email that you had sent out, that I have called my flagship article, is not directed towards hyper-preterists at all. And they kept yelling and screaming that I didn't address their arguments. And I said, you aren't my audience. The audience that I am targeting with that article is the Christian who wants to find out the answer, are these just someone that I can disagree with but not divide with. And the article sets out the case that you must divide from them.
When we come back from the break, Dee Dee, if you could provide our listeners with a list of, at least a small list of the leading figures in hyper-preterism. But our number is 631-321-WNYG. If you'd like to join us, this is your final opportunity to call Dee Dee Warren with a question or a comment, whether you agree or disagree with her. 631-321-WNYG. This is our last segment of today's program. 631-321-WNYG. 631-321-WNYG. We'll be right back with Dee Dee Warren and our discussion on hyper-preterism. Welcome back. This is Chris Arns, and here's your last opportunity to call our show with Dee Dee Warren on hyper-preterism. 631-321-WNYG. 631-321-WNYG. Dee Dee, who would be the leading figures within the hyper-preterist movement?
I'm going to give a top three, though there will be some other more minor figures. Again, they are so fragmented that it's difficult to point out leaders. But there are some men that I could point to as definite leaders. Right now, their golden boy is Samuel Frost, because I believe he's one of the few that has a seminary education. He's of the more conservative faction. Then you've got a guy by the name of Virgil Valduba, and he is of the emergent side, swing way all over to the other side. So those two guys are kind of like opposites. You would have, obviously, Don Preston, and the person I had mentioned that I have respect for, David Green. And then you've got some more minor figures, but they're very vocal, such as Dave Curtis, Ward Fenley, Michael Bennett, Jason Bradfield. The minor figures change from year to year, but those larger names, Preston, Green, Frost, Valdova, have been active for as long as I've been involved with this. There used to be a very popular guy named H.L. James, but I don't know what happened to him. I don't think anyone knows what happened to him.
Now, I know that Don Preston was connected with the Church of Christ. And by the way, let me make it clear, I have many friends in the Church of Christ, and this is a minority within the Church of Christ, just as it is a tiny minority within Presbyterianism. But where would Sam Frost and David Green and Valdova be connected with, if any of those groups? Would they be more the Reformed camp or the...
David and Samuel would definitely be of the Reformed camp. Virgil, he's an emergent. So he's definitely about as anti-reformed as you can get. I really could not even closely, put him into any category other than McLarenite. He basically would kiss the ground Brian McLaren walks on.
Well, some of those folks in the emergent church will identify themselves in some varying ways with being Reformed, though. Falsely, I believe, but...
Yeah, no, Virgil would be very upfront that he is definitely not Reformed.
Okay. Now, I guess Max King would be no longer one of the chief figures in this group?
That whole side of the movement is kind of getting a revival, but, you know, the books are still out there. But the Max King and his son, that whole, I forget what the ministry is called, I've been racking my brain, it has lost a great deal of influence. Mm-hmm. Right now, if I were to say the most influential hyper-preterist, it would be Samuel Frost.